Hello, awesome people! I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the last book in the Icewind Dale trilogy by R.A. Salvatore called The Halfling's Gem, which was published in the late 80s by TSR in their Forgotten Realms series. It's the sequel to the first two books that we've just doing a deep dive into for you folks. I obviously don't need to tell you very much about R.A. Salvatore because most people know who he is because he's got like a ton, more than a score, best-selling books for the New York Times bestseller list. So therefore, he's definitely somebody whose name is definitely known. I read his stuff as soon as he was published. He was my first favorite. He was my second favorite author of all time, after Tolkien was. After I read the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy when I was in elementary school. I read this a couple of years later. Really loved it. After reading the Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman Dragonlance stuff, I then went to the Forgotten Realms stuff, picked this stuff up from my local Walden Books and so in West Virginia. And I definitely enjoyed it. So I definitely did a deeper dive into it. I'm going to be giving this book, his third book that he's published ever in his entire life, a 7 out of 10. A lot of the early stuff that was getting published by these major worlds by TSR are regularly by people that have not published before. For example, the first novel that's published in the Forgotten Realms series is by Douglas Niles, a guy who had worked for the company and have written some modules and guidebooks and so forth for the Dungeons & Dragons, but this was his first thing. He wrote a book set in the Forgotten Realms called Moonshae. Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman knocked it out of the park with the Dragonlance stuff and made some big selling stuff. And they were brand new to writing fiction. But for example, Tracy Hickman had also been working for TSR, the company that had put together that world, and he had written some modules with his wife. Like a basically a set module called Rahasia. So they were both also brand new to novel writing, though, just like Douglas Niles and just like R.A. Salvatore, who's also pretty new to novel writing too. So basically what's going to be, as a reminder, keep my reviews spoiler free, but basically what's going to be happening is that at the end of the previous book, our halfling thief has been stolen and taken to justice because of something that he stole a long time ago that he's been fleeing from ever since. And now the rest of the party is going to be chasing him in order to set up to find him. So it's going to be a chase. And that's basically the key concept. And then they'll find a person, and that's it. That's the novel, writ short. Drizzt Do'Urden is a big hit. He really hit a lot of different sort of things. The park has lots of fans with people during that generation in the 80s and 90s. And lots of characters were created that were in the Drizzt mold for Dungeons & Dragons archetypes. And meeting Drizzt Do'Urden is also a key part of, Dungeons & Dragons, Forgotten Realms-ishness. For example, in the video game Baldur's Gate, you meet Drizzt Do'Urden out in the wilderness. Just use a bat. That is, sort of who he is. He sells stuff, right? And anyway, his concept was that he's a good guy from an evil race of spin-offs of the elves called the Drow that live underground and have been tormented by their evilness. And now he is a good guy, and he has fled them into the surface world, which is sort of a combination of two major archetypes from two previous generations. The first generation, the J.R.R. Tolkien one, of Aragorn, the traveler, who is a ranger, who can track things with his tracking senses, and he's really strong in combat. Drizzt Do'Urden is definitely a ranger in the Aragorn mold. He's also a Elric, the Woman Slayer, a few decades later, from in the 60s and 70s, by Michael Moorcock. He's a big character in that genre. A generation later, as this evil race of non-humans called that aren't human, called the Melnibians, and he is the ruler of them, and he's born with pangs of consciousness. And so he flees his homeland in order to set about traveling about among the world. So that's Elric of Melnibity by Michael Moorcock, is also a key person too in this foundation of Drizzt Do'Urden. Back a couple decades later in the 80s and 90s. Now it'll be a big hit too. So basically, he's just combining two established archetypes: the Aragorn archetype with the Elric archetype, and that's it. and with the anti-hero of Arc. And that's it. You've got those two characters combined, and they were both big hits and sold lots of books and lots of fans that have still endured to this era. So that's where you sort of got this concept, and I definitely can see it here. And you can definitely see how influential this stuff is. As a reminder, I like to go back and read a lot of these things for this channel. Because the name of this channel, The Worst Thing About New Books, is a quote by Jacques Joubert, a French philosopher, who said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept us from reading the old books. So I like to go back and reread a lot of those things. This is a series that I go back and reread occasionally here and there. And I reread this out while I was vacationing in Israel at night after I was done. My goal was to knock this out in 3 days. I knocked it out, actually the first 100 pages on the same day that I knocked out the last 100 pages of the previous book, Streams of Silver. So I did 200 pages in one day rather than just, it's about 300 pages long. Took me about 6 hours for me to go back and reread it again for another time. And I knocked it out in 2.5 basically days at my hotel room, and I definitely enjoyed it and blew through it. It's a lot of fun stuff was happening. So, my goal was to knock out these 6 books on these 10 days, on the 2 days too, the 1 day back, and then the 7 days in Israel, and I did 5 of them. Not all 6 of the next 3 books we'll take a look at. The Dark Elf Trilogy is a sequel to this, but it's a prequel, so it's a prequel sequel. With the sense of the Dark Elf story. This is the first trilogy, and particularly the first book, feel more like they are just a group of adventurers about which Truth Thornton's just a character, but he's definitely so he feels a little bit like an extended extra, if you will, because the next books will be all about him. Also, his character will change over time into more of a brooding sort of a thing. Like in the first book, he's just a happy-go-lucky ranger who's constantly throwing himself in the battle. And then his character will change as moving forward. So I'm giving this book, I gave the first book a 6 out of 10. I'm giving the last book a 7-, and this book is now kind of a 7 out of 10. It's fun. I go back and reread the series every so often, and this is the first time I've gone back and reread it in probably about 6 or 7 years. It's definitely comfort food for a lot of folks. So I like to go back and reread these sort of things, and again, something from the 80s and 90s and so forth. And this series is definitely something that's decades old, and so it's definitely older books to modern audiences. So it fits the cue of what I'm doing for this channel. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read The Halfling Gem by R.A. Salvatore? If so, what would you think about it? Do you agree or disagree with my thoughts in any way or shape or form? Let's talk about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.